Okay, this is my 15-minute video for Module 1. I'm going to be talking about the Puritans. I'm going to talk about McCarthyism. I'm going to talk about Arthur Miller and the Salem Witch Trials. So let's begin. All right, so first we have the Puritans. And the Puritans were a group of people who came over seeking religious freedom from England at the inception of the colonies. We have William Bradford, who was a Puritan, and his works on the Mayflower, which talk about the harsh life of the Puritan people. So why were they leaving England? So they were leaving England, of course, for religious freedom, because they sought to reform the church in England and simplify it to make their worship a more truer and simplified form of worship, because they didn't like what England was doing. So they left and they came to America and started their own church and really just like made their own way in life. And of course, one characteristic of the Puritans is they lived a very simple life, but in that simple life, it became very hard on them, especially in the New World. It's just scarcity in food and everything. But what was important to them was having God at the center of their life always. And like their entire life revolved around God and their faith, which is great. The Puritans also, so once they landed, the Puritans, of course, took up settlement and really started their way of life in the in America, or the New World. And they were a very central figure in throughout the 16th and 17th century, or 17th and 18th century, with the development of America, because that's the group that sort of was the precursor to the colonies. Like their way of life came before the colonies, so I think that definitely prompted like having America, which is the only nation founded on like an ideological principle. I think that definitely shaped the way some of our founding fathers looked at and treated how they wanted their nation to be built. Because like I said, America was the only nation built on an ideological principle. So it wasn't a matter of war that they got that land. It wasn't a matter of trade or like some marital agreement. It was a group of people building a nation off of like a group of people's ideas. And of course that was Christianity, but more specifically Puritanism. And I think that really set up and paved the way for our nation to be as strong and as free as it is today without the Puritans. But yeah, they're a really interesting group to read about, and I love reading their plain style of literature, just because it is so fascinating to see how focused their life was on God, and like all they worried about was God, feeding themselves, and putting a roof over their heads, and it was very, very interesting to see that. Just because I think a way of life like that is important, especially in today's world. I think we're sort of caught up a lot of the times in the busyness and the hustle and bustle of life. But if we just like refocused on living simply and eating simpler and, just redirecting our minds towards God constantly, I think it will be better. Yeah, there were a few problems with the Puritans, that being which there was a lot of scandal in their church hierarchy, because people got greedy for money and stuff like that. So there are problems with them, but I think there's a lot to learn from them that we can't learn from them. And then next we have McCarthyism, and McCarthyism is comes from a guy named Senator McCarthy, who sort of started this Red Dead and this communistic fear inside the American people in the 20th century. This was right around the Vietnam War, and people were afraid of communist regimes coming into America and taking over and changing our country. So Joseph McCarthy kind of spoke out about that, and he convicted not convicted, but he called out a lot of people on supporting the Communist Party, and there's this whole scandal about this list of people, and like if your name was on the list, you were labeled as like a communist, and society treated you differently, and it was a huge movement, just the Red Dead movement, and with McCarthyism. But one major theme of McCarthyism is kind of the idea that you can't really trust anyone, and that at any point in time, your reputation can be shattered and kind of destroyed by people around you for like snitching. So yeah, that was huge. Next we have Arthur Miller, and Arthur Miller was a man who wrote The Crucible, and The Crucible talks about Salem witch trials, but it wasn't. It was about the Salem witch trials, but it was written during the time of McCarthyism, and they were sort of meant to mirror each other. He talked about the Salem witch trials kind of in light of McCarthyism, just because it was a good way to highlight the amount people were okay with kind of snitching on their neighbor and telling their neighbor for the good of society, and that's a very common theme in both of them, because in the Salem witch trials we have this group of girls, and they eventually get found out that they were doing this demonic activity, and they only got discovered because one of the girls snitched on them. I forgot her name, but her name starts with a T. And she kind of told the town about them, and that uncovered everything, just like in McCarthyism. And yes, and that is time, and I think that's about all I have to talk about. Again, Arthur Miller I just wanted to touch back on Arthur Miller. Arthur Miller wrote The Crucible, but he also wrote All My Sons, which is a popular book, but they also made it into a play, and I saw the play, and it was actually very good. So yeah, that's just one more piece, and that's about it. Thank you.